Hey guys, for this video I had an actual client instead of working on a theoretical problem, and because of that the session was genuine and a lot of the conversation we had I wanted to include in this video. Had I known I was going to do that I would have worn a mic, but now I know for future reference I've kept a lot of the conversation in, hoping that you guys will get some stuff out of it. So without further ado, enjoy. Talk to me about what happened.
Okay, I broke both sides of my ankle, here and here, and I have a break on my fibula.
And it happened because you were roller skating and your ankle fell in?
Yeah, my ankle did, like,
internal.
Yeah, it was, I guess, this way.
Yep.
Yeah, like that.
Okay. And right now, if you put both of your feet out like this, show me what your left foot can do. Flexion, eversion, and inversion, and then show me what your right foot can do. Okay. And any pain anywhere?
No pain, just a lot of stiffness.
Okay. And that's the thing that you're wanting to resolve most, is trying to get mobility.
Mobility.
Okay. Okay. And you have some bruises. You just went to the physical therapist?
Yeah, I have some pretty nice color here from some bruising. They just really scraped the whole calf to just try to open things up a little bit.
And is there bruising down in here, or is that...
I feel like the discoloration is just going to be forever. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's...
This is not bruised, though.
It's
okay,
like discoloration.
Yep, I see it. Can I see your other foot compared? Okay. Okay, so what I'm seeing is out here, a lot of discoloration, the scar here, coming in here, scar here, lots of discoloration here, and then the work from the calf coming up, and then you had that fracture there.
And this is all severe nerve damage in here. So that's something that I'm still...
What can you feel and what can you not feel?
This is pretty numb in here, but it's just really sensitive to just...
Does it feel
sensitive.
weird?
Yeah,
it feels weird.
like...
What about your toes?
The toes are just very stiff. Like when I'm at PT and they do like moving, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's very painful.
But you have feeling in your toes.
I have feeling,
but
yeah,
weird nerves.
This is where
here.
he said that, cutting into the nerve for the surgery.
Anything on this side?
Not nearly as much. It's all up here.
Mainly lateral.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all tingly and just fun.
Okay, ready to stand up?
Yes.
Okay, so that was our initial conversation, and I wanted to get her to stand up to see what she could do, what felt painful. I'm having her step her foot forward and rock a little bit to see if there's any pain with any movement, and then I'm having her stand with a neutral stance, and she's expressing to me that she can't really do that. I'm having her also go up on her toes to see what her ability is, and for camera angle I wanted to show you guys from the posterior view what this looked like. So as she leans forward you can really see that her weight is pretty heavily on her left leg, and as she shifts onto that right leg she was expressing some discomfort with the lack of range of motion. And then as she tries to stand neutral, she can't get that heel down. And then I have her switch to face forward so you can see everything from this perspective. Same thing, just kind of holding the foot forward, shifting from left to right, and then standing up on her toes. And then also seeing what her toes can do if she can lift her toes up off of the ground, which she has a hard time doing. As you can see, I'm doing a lot of this movement with her, which I think just helps the process. I think it helps her feel supported. And I'm repeating a lot of what she says just to make sure that she knows she is heard. And I am also getting this information a little more deeply ingrained in my brain so that I can remember what I'm focusing on. Okay. So right now, your foot is forward. I'm going to have you turn your foot in just a little bit. Perfect. And I want to just start to feel anything. I want you to tell me if there's anything that feels painful as I get closer. Doing okay?
It's okay. Starting to get in that joint is exactly where all the
stuff is.
There,
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to slide myself out here. And this is where the scraping was, and come down anytime it is in here.
It's okay.
Down in here.
get tender.
Tender.
Mm-hmm.
And that weird nervy pain down here. You can see the ischemia. Okay.
Yeah, right here is where
all that pain is. Okay. So as I sink in here, I'm going to sink in, I'm going to dive into the more painful spots. You said it's been 4 months?
Mm-hmm. It's coming on 4 months.
Okay. So I'm going to dive into the more painful spots, and I want you to lean your weight onto this foot, and then bend your knee towards me. So you're kind of lunging towards me as best as you can.
I mean, I can't get much.
Right? So go back into the back, and then come back into it. Back into a normal stance, and then come back into it. Back into a normal stance, and then come back into it. Good. And lay it down. Good. Okay. I'm going to come into the side of the soleus here a little bit. You paint it a little in there. Feeling that. Okay, so do the same action, so you're lunging towards me. Good. And lunge towards me. Good. Last time, try to stick your heel down into the ground. Good. And back. And then lunge and stick. And down. Good. So you've got a little bit of edema in there. Do you see that? There are a couple different reasons why I wanted to do a palpatory assessment with her standing before I got her on the table. Number one, with an ankle injury like this, I wanted to see how she was doing with any weight-bearing movement. So as she plants her foot on the ground and I start to palpate and press into different areas, the movement coming from the knee and the hip is going to be very different than what it feels like when she's on the table and the foot is moving without any weight on top of it. Number two, she's got a pretty significant amount of edema in the ankle, and as she stands, that's going to be very different than when she's on the table. And I wanted to see exactly how thick it was as gravity pulled it down. It was actually pretty thick and didn't want to move, so here's a good shot of my thumbprint in that edema. I want to do some toe stuff for sure. So I'm going to have you pull yourself back to a bilateral stance as best as you can, okay? And I'm going to do two things. I'm going to do one with you lifting your toes up off the ground, and then one with you going up onto your toes, okay? So the first one is going to be the lifting your toes up off the ground, and then the second one is going to be lifting your heel up off the ground. So similar area in here. Is there a spot that feels particularly like a good spot to you, or does it all just feel wonky?
It's all wonky in there.
Right there.
That's where it's just all the
right.
You know, the point,
right.
The work that needs to be done is in there.
Okay. So lift your toes up, hold, 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 and back down. Good. Again, lift up. Back down. Good. Good. One more time. Lift up. You can see all these tendons firing, and I can feel it under my thumb and down. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Do you want to pull your foot forward and take a rest? Give your legs some love. Okay. Okay, can you go back into bilateral? Okay, so you're going to rise up onto your toes as best as you can.
Like actually.
Yep. Both feet. Lift up. Hold, and if you need to hold on to me, you can.
I know I do.
Can you reach my shoulder or no? Put your hand on my head? You can. Okay. Good, and back down. And then one more time, try to really engage your toes. Grip your toes down into the floor. Grip, 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 grip. Good, and back down. Good. So these aren't even firing when you go up on your toes. They're like not, they're just not even engaging when you do that. You've got to, I want to turn your, you can see the edema happening in there. And lift your toes up. Just want to give you a shot of the tendons going firing over there. Okay, down. Okay. And turn, if, nope, I'm going to have you turn this way. Yep, perfect. Like that. I'm going to have you a little bit more directly that way. Good, and pull your foot back, stand bilaterally. Good, so you've got this space under here that we want to try to resolve, okay? So I'm going to come into the lower part of the gastrocs and the soleus in here, I'm going to sink into the Achilles, which feels really crazy tight to me. I'm going to have you, what you're going to do is you're going to push your heel down and bend both knees forward. And try to think about sinking your weight down through your hip onto here, okay? So I'm going to sink in, so go ahead and push your knees forward and push your heel down. Good, and back up. No, but you know what? Like it's just kind of getting blood flow and creating a change in here. It just feels like there's no change in here. Okay. Okay, so again, sink your heel down, push your knee forward. Get that right knee forward a little bit more. Good. And back up. Yeah, I know.
Shut up, Wes.
Okay, one more time and then you can take a break. Okay? Ready? Yep, go ahead. Pushing your heel down, pushing your knee forward. Really sit down into those hips. Good, and stand back up. Oh no. No. Okay. Okay. Yeah, take a break. Okay, I think that's all I want to do from the floor. Okay, so I've gotten a lot of information from her standing, and I've got her face down on the table. I'm noticing some spider veins in the back of her knees, and I just want to confirm with her that she's okay, which she said she is. So I'm going to start the work. I'm starting with her face down because I felt an unbelievable amount of tension in the gastrocs and the soleus and down into the Achilles tendon. She definitely expressed a lot of her issue in the front of the ankle, but I want to loosen up the back and I have a little more access to the scars from this position. So I want to warm things up and break stuff open while she's in this position before I dive into the front of the ankle where it feels like there's actually a lot more scar tissue and hardening of the tissue that is causing a lot of her discomfort. I'm focusing first on doing some pretty deep lymphatic drainage, which I mentioned in my YouTube video, but I want to elaborate on that a little bit more. So lymphatic drainage is done very lightly, typically, and done in a very methodical way. If you were taught this in massage school, it's typically taught in an order that kind of works from proximal to distal and focuses on opening up the lymph vessels to allow the lymph in. What I'm doing here is a lot more of very physically pushing up this viscous edema that has decided to set up shop in the ankle. So as I push it up from the ankle, I'm moving it up in through the calf and all the way up into the popliteal crease where there are a significant amount of lymph nodes that I know can start to drain some of this extra lymph away from this area. I want to spend a lot of time doing this because it is so thick and the scar tissue has embedded itself so deeply in this area. I want to take my time here and not rush over this process. This can be really beneficial to be able to actually sink in deeper once a lot of this extra fluid has been pushed up away from the injured area. I was using my thumb pretty specifically down in the ankle to do the detailed work, and now I'm using a nice broad palm to get all of that stuff up into the back of the knee. I've switched my focus to the medial side of the ankle now. There's an equally significant scar on the medial side of the ankle, and I'm using obviously both my fingers and my thumbs to do this detailed work. I'm making sure I'm coming around the entirety of both the lateral and the medial malleolus and working through a lot of that discoloration. A lot of that bruising is really deep because of that internal hardware and because of those pretty severe breaks. So it's going to take time to work through, and I want to make sure I'm as detailed as possible in pushing this edema up away from her ankle. I'm going to leave the footage in to show you exactly how long I spend doing this. You are more than welcome to skip ahead, I think about to the 16:50-minute mark, but I wanted to leave it in to show you how much time I felt was necessary to hang out and do this kind of work for this specific injury. Okay, so I've pushed a lot of that edema up away from the ankle, and I want to focus now on the deeper structures, the tendons and the ligaments, and that really deep scar tissue. And I want to start by getting the attachment sites of the muscles that run down across the ankle into the bottom of the foot. This can get really hard on your thumbs, so I'm using one thumb and my other hand to help with that pressure to sink into the depth that I need to get to for this work. I'm focusing on the tibialis anterior and posterior and the peroneals that come down and create a stirrup into the foot. And my intention here is to really sink in and soften up the muscles that create inversion and eversion, and those are two of the actions that she's having a really hard time doing right now. I've switched my grip so that my thumbs are really into the lateral part of the bottom of the foot, and my fingers are supporting the top of the foot as I start to influence the foot into eversion. So with this work, I'm just trying to guide the foot back into a motion that it's not really wanting to do and it's not able to do. And as I do that, I'm telling my client to envision that her ankle is moving in this direction that we want it to move into. A lot of the times that internal intention can just help the process along a little bit faster. I'm still focused on the bottom of the foot here, but I want to open up the deeper intrinsic muscles that lie underneath the plantar fascia. So a lot of the flexors that pull the toe down into a gripping motion haven't been used for a while for her. So I'm creating a pin and stretch for these muscles. As I sink my left thumb into the belly of these muscles, I'm using my right hand to extend the toes out and lengthen these muscles out. This is pretty intense work for her, so I want to continue to make nice as much as I can as I transition from one technique into the other. I gave my client a little bit of a jostle there just to remind her to really let go of everything. It's really easy for clients to want to help. And once she did, I want to continue on this path of detailed work. I think this is incredibly important. So I'm taking each toe and I'm really just extending them and opening up all of those deep muscles at the bottom of the foot and letting them lengthen out. So I'm taking each toe and offering it a slow but gentle stretch. Having her really just allow it to lengthen and allow it to stretch out. That's not always easy to do, so I'm encouraging her as I do this by just giving her some visual cues to let the bottom of her foot feel nice and open and long and soft. I've also found a couple of good points with the first two toes that I felt like needed a little bit of an extra pin and stretch. So I used my left thumb to create a little bit of an extra pin and stretch at the end there, but really just lengthening, opening, and detailed work. I'm going to have you curl your toes down and point your foot as much as you can. Okay. I'm going to sink in first and then have you curl and hold, and then you're going to release it. I'm going to sink in even more. Okay? So go ahead and curl your toes down, point your toes, point, 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 point. And then relax. Good. Okay, curl your toes down, point, 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 point. Really reach your toes down towards me. Awesome. And relax. All the way down, relax all the way down. Good. One more time, curl in, sinking here, point, 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 point. Good. And relax. So that was more of an active release technique focused on those same muscles in the bottom of the foot, really sinking in with my thumb while she engaged them. And then once she released them, just allowing it to really let go and opening a lot of that stuff up. That was one of those clips I thought you guys would actually want to hear. Now that I've softened up a lot of the musculature in the bottom of the foot, I want to sink down into the bones, into the tarsals and metatarsals, and try to separate them out as much as possible. I'm using my right hand to pull the bottom of the foot into a softened position while I use my left thumb to sink in. And then once I've done that, I want to actually separate out the metatarsals. So very methodically, from lateral to medial, I'm using my fingers on the top of the foot and my thumbs on the bottom of the foot to slide the metatarsals back and forth, really staying parallel to each other. I'm not rocking them in or curving the foot in. I'm just shifting them back and forth and envisioning the connective tissue in between all of those bones starting to open up and spread out. My client actually really loved this. Most clients do, so this technique does not have to be reserved for someone with an ankle injury. I simply thought it might feel good to lift her own leg up off the table and stretch her foot out, so I had her do that. I'm going to start to do some more specific work into her scar tissue, and as I do, I want to talk a little bit about deep pressure and how to know exactly how deep you're going to work with a client like this, or really with any client for that matter. So as I'm sinking in, I'm talking to my client very specifically about what feels productive, what feels painful, and what feels like it's too much. My client happens to be a massage therapist and has really dropped into what feels good and what doesn't feel good. But more importantly, she's had this injury for 4 months now. So her tissues are in the remodeling phase and ready to be broken apart. We don't want it to cement too much so that her range of motion is limited forever. We want to start to break that stuff apart at the right moment, and now is the right moment for her. With this scar, I'm really focused on pulling up away from the ankle and towards the calf muscles. And the reason why I'm doing that is because the way that scar tissue forms is it really connects into itself and then becomes like a tighter fabric than it was before. So it pulls from all the surrounding connective tissue. And what I want to do is ensure that as it pulls down into the ankle, that the connective tissue that bleeds up into the calf muscles are not getting pulled down so much so that the gastrocs and the soleus. So one of the things that I want to do with her is take this work all the way up into the musculotendinous junction and then up into the calf itself, have her engage the calf so that the neuromuscular component from her brain to the engagement of this muscle all the way down to the tendon and movement of the ankle and foot, all of this stays connected, and all of this starts to feel an unraveling and an unwinding of this completely clasped down glue that is binding her ankle together. I'm tapping the calf a little bit here because I think her proprioception around her lower leg is completely off. So I want to give her as many tactile cues as I can as she is pointing her feet into plantar flexion and engaging the calf muscle and then releasing it. I'm just trying to draw awareness around all of these actions and all of these movements and bringing her back down into something that has felt pretty numb for her up to this point. Come in and I'm going to create movement for you, okay? So try to just let let your kneecaps go, let your hips go. Okay, I'm going to sink in here, I'm going to pull your toes up, down, up. So I'm sinking in with my thumb here as I create this passive range of motion, and that's very different from applying a pressure and asking my client to move. When she moves, she is firing muscles and engaging tissue that requires the fibers of the muscles to contract and then relax. But as I move for her with that same applied pressure, it's more of a passive lengthening that's happening and that affects the tissues very differently. With this amount of focused work in one area, I am now able to sink in really deep, and the levels I'm getting to are pretty intense. So I want to check in with my client and see how she's doing. Okay? Yeah. What did you say? It's so tender?
Yeah.
Are you still okay, or
yeah.
do you feel like you need me to?
Okay.
Okay. We're going to do, I know, we're going to do a little bit of trying to evert, and I think that you don't have any ability to evert right now. So bring this side of your foot up to this side. Finger like that, and then release it back down. Like there's nothing there. But I want you to do it because I want these muscles to engage. Okay, so try to let your leg drop down the ground, but as much as you can, pull this up that way. Good. Okay, let your toes relax, but just think about this section. Perfect. Okay, let it relax. Okay, so pull up. There you go. And then let it relax back down. And do that again, okay? Up. Breathe and back down. Can you handle one more?
Yeah.
Okay. Up. Back down. Good. My client is super motivated to get better, so I'm pushing her beyond maybe how much I would push another client in this same scenario, but I'm checking in and making sure she's doing okay the entire time. I've got my client flipped over, obviously, and I want to focus a lot of the same detail on the front of the ankle that I did on the back. So the muscles I'm targeting are the tibialis anterior, tibialis posterior, and the extensors of the ankle and the toes, which I'm going to dive into in a little bit, but I want to start this work with the same detailed lymphatic flush that I did on the posterior aspect of the ankle. So I'm going to spend some time really working through a lot of that edema and pushing it up towards the knee. Obviously, because it's on the front of the ankle, I'm not going to push it up towards the kneecap. I'm going to send it back again towards the popliteal crease where the lymph nodes are, but I'm going to take my time here and work methodically through all the aspects of the front of the ankle and making sure a lot of that fluid is pushed away so I can dive in a little bit deeper to those tendons, ligaments, and scar tissue that I really want to address. Again, I'm going to leave this footage in, so if you want to skip ahead, I think it's only about 1 minute to 29:36. Okay, now that that is properly flushed out, I know that's not the most exciting thing to watch, but you get the point. It's all about the detail. I'm going to dive into the tibialis anterior and the extensors of the foot and the toes. Tibialis anterior is most immediately lateral to the tibia, and then the extensors lie just lateral to that. So with this first move, I'm focusing on the extensors, and as I slide up the muscle, I'm pushing her foot down into plantar flexion and inversion just a little bit to help elongate those muscles and also stretch out the connective tissue that's kind of wrapped up into that scar tissue. Similar to what I was doing before, I want to make sure that all of that scar tissue that is gripping down and starting to cement around her ankle is loosening up and allowing for a little more freedom of movement, which is ultimately the goal. I think one of the mistakes that newer therapists tend to make a lot is to work too fast. And as you can tell, I'm working really slowly all the way up the line of this muscle, and I think that serves a really specific purpose. When you're sinking in this deeply and you're working this slow, it tends to offer the client time to adjust to what you're doing and give her mind the ability to relax around receiving that work. If the therapist is working aggressively and fast, it's harder for the client to relax and receive that work. So slowing down, especially with this deeper work, can be really beneficial. I'm doing the same technique with a little more brevity down into where this muscle becomes a tendon and focusing again on that scar tissue and the surrounding connective tissue that bleeds throughout the ankle and then all the way up into the lower leg. Okay, so do you feel my hand there? Can you push up against it? Okay. So I'm going to have you do toes first and then foot.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm going to hang out here with the toes. Pull your toes up towards your knee. Good. And relax down. Okay, so that's the thing I'm going to have you do. I'm going to sink in here and pull your toes up. Try less of the foot and the big toe and more of the these toes. Okay. All right. So go ahead and pull up. Yeah. There you go. And relax. Again. And relax back down. Good. So this time we're going to do whole foot as much as you can. Try to take the toes out of it and just pull the foot up. Okay? So then pull up. Good. And relax all the way down. Doing okay? Within your tolerance or a little bit more?
Yes.
Okay, again, pull up, up. And down. Good. Okay, what I'd like to do is come in to here and start digging this out. I feel like this is kind of what you were saying, a lot of the crux of it is like right in the front here. Right at the front of the ankle is the crux of where she is feeling most of her pain. And this tends to be a tender area to begin with working with clients, but I do want to try to sink in here a little bit just to create movement, if nothing else. So I'm coming around to the side of the table. I've got my left thumb in the crux of her ankle, kind of between the two tendons of the tibialis anterior and the extensor digitorum longus. And as I sink in, I'm using my right arm to dorsiflex the foot up and soften that area so that I can sink down a little bit and create a little bit of space while I'm in there. I'm definitely a firm believer in coming at an injury or an issue from as many different angles as possible. I've seen it on more than one occasion where I've been trying to address something from one angle and then came at it from a different perspective, and it seemed to really do the trick. And I'm doing that here for my client's ankle. I was just standing on the side of the table. I had my left thumb in the ankle as I used my right arm to dorsiflex and soften the area as I sunk in. And then I've moved to the foot of the table where I'm using my thumbs to sink in and my fingers to pull up, and then I'm switching the mechanics of my hands so that my fingers are sinking into the top of my ankle and my thumbs are doing the manipulating of the movement of the foot. I'm also playing around with not just dorsiflexion, but inversion and eversion to try to sink into all these little nuanced spots within the top of the foot that are really bothering my client, creating a little friction, creating a little movement, creating a lot of blood flow, and hopefully some more range of motion. I can't stress enough the importance of making nice after you do a lot of this really deep digging work. It is so important to all of the tissues and for the mindset of the client for you to do work that flushes things out and makes the area feel a little more at ease and not so stabby. There is definitely such a thing as work that is too deep and too aggressive, and if you are doing the deeper, more aggressive work, make sure you make nice. I'm coming in with a little friction right now into the extensor hallucis longus, which is the tendon of the muscle that pulls up the big toe. I just had her pull her big toe up to her knee as I was pressing in, and when she releases it down, I'm creating a little bit of friction in this area just to help release the connective tissue of these tendons in the front of the ankle and also the retinaculum that covers these tendons, and making sure that they can slide against each other and find movement once again. I'm repeating the same technique into the tendons of the extensor digitorum longus, and the big picture here is be methodical, be detailed, make sure to address all of the minutiae around the area that is injured, and I think even more importantly, make sure to address not just the muscle tissue but the connective tissue as well. I've moved back over to the side and I'm applying the same maneuver to try to get the foot to evert a little more. I'm sinking my thumb in as I pull the foot out into eversion and creating a softening of the tissues in the lateral part of the ankle in hopes to find more movement and more blood flow. I should mention that most of what I'm feeling and most of what's going on with her ankle is incredibly deep and not stuff that I can access. But my whole focus here, and as a massage therapist, what we can do more than anything else is to help with all of the soft tissue around an injury that has guarded or is protecting or has created scar tissue that we might not be able to access, but we can definitely encourage the process and encourage the nervous system to let go and help that healing process. This little flappity flap technique I pulled from reflexology actually, and I encourage you guys all the time to pull from all of your tool bags. I think that even if you call yourself a deep tissue therapist or a shiatsu therapist or a Reiki practitioner, pull from all of the modalities and use them when you can. It feels great. For the last part of the session, I really focused on the tibialis posterior, the medial side of the ankle, the scar that lies in this area, and the inability to invert, which is pretty severe for her. And really, I'm just going to repeat a lot of the same techniques that you have seen me apply to the anterior ankle, the lateral ankle, the posterior ankle, trying to come in, reduce the swelling, open up the scar tissue, and get the soft tissue, get the muscle tissue to remember its actions, to remember what it feels like to move, and to become free of that encroaching scar tissue that's kind of gripping everything down. I'm going to keep explaining what I did, so if you're kind of sick of listening to me talk, which I don't blame you, go ahead and hit that mute button. But if you're still listening, kudos. I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with you. I'm just kidding. So right here, I'm using my left palm to anchor down the tibia as I use my fingertips to slide underneath the tibia and into the tibialis posterior itself. As I do that, I'm using my right hand to move the foot around a little bit and then stabilize it as I slide up the tibialis posterior, releasing all of that connective tissue that glues that pretty flat muscle onto the posterior aspect of the tibia, hence the muscle's name. This muscle is really prone to becoming very tight regardless of whether or not you've got an ankle injury, so work in here can be tender no matter what. But with my client and with this issue, it has kind of gone into overload and gone into hyperprotection mode. So I want to really release a lot of that up and make sure that it's able to contract when she does want to pull her ankle up into inversion. I want to also spend a little time on the flexor hallucis longus, which I did earlier, but I want to repeat it, mainly because it's also an inverter. So I want to address it while I'm working with inversion and the tibialis posterior, and really addressing the proprioception in the Golgi tendon organ and waking it up, asking it to fire, and relieving a lot of that tension that has just built itself into the ankle at this point. I'm using an active release technique here for the extensor hallucis longus, which I've demonstrated a couple times already, but as much as I can, I want her to try to isolate her big toe from her other toes in an effort to kind of bring down awareness into all the different nuanced movements of the ankle and the foot and the toes. And then I'm going to work my way back up the tibialis posterior. I don't know about you guys, but I hate work on my tibialis posterior so much that I have worked really hard on trying to come up with ways to be able to sink in and not create such a painful response. So as I'm trying to sink in this session, what I'm doing is really using my palms to distract by pressing down into the tibia, and then while my fingers are pulling up into the back side of that bone and those attachment sites, I'm just leaning back and allowing the whole leg to fall out into a little bit of external rotation. I think it distracts away from the immediate pinpointed pressure in this region and feels a little bit less intense than if you just kind of sink in and start scraping it away. If you've got a client like I do who is not like me and who actually can take the pressure in the medial side of the tibia, then this is what an active release technique looks like. So I've given her a tactile cue as to how to pull the inside of her foot up towards the inside of her knee, and I'm sinking in with my fingers as she fires that muscle and has it contract. I can really feel it firing underneath my pressure, which is a great sign even though I can barely see any movement. So I want to do a combination of two things. I want to keep those muscles active, yet at the same time release them and not let them grip too much. So as I sink in and she fires, I'm creating a counter pressure, and then when she releases it down, I'm applying a deeper pressure and allowing a lot of that stuff to release and let go. That's more. Mm-hmm. That's more. And stand here again. Lift your toes up. That's it. And then up on your toes. That's good? Mm-hmm. Let's face that way. Okay, so stay nice and bilateral. Right foot is up. That's okay. Just shifting back and forth. It feels better though. That's good. Face the camera. Bilateral. Good. Forward. Internal. It's hard to do. Here. Put your toes up. Up, up. Good. And up on your toes. Do a funny little like hand. Slap feet. Slap. Slap.